Well, welcome everyone. I appreciate your patience as we always, typically with foods, we always get started a little bit later than the start time because people are eating. So we have a lot to get through tonight. Who here has been to another class that I have taught? That's good. So you'll know that I'm going to probably go till about 10 tonight, right? Just kidding. Casey's giving me the No, my goal tonight is to kind of talk a little bit shorter, try to give some real, I don't want to say brief information, but compared to my other classes, my goal is to keep this one a little bit shorter. Because my last one went till 9:15, so my goal is not to try to break that. Probably ever. So basically tonight, the base of the class is the chemistry of life and human potential and performance. So let's get started. So who knows what the last part of this statement is? Knowledge is what? Power. So what if I told you that was a complete lie? So, because knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential power. Because if you know something and don't do anything about it, that's just as bad as not knowing it. If not anything, it's actually worse. And that's really what I want you to start to think about, is because we all know stuff that we can do to be healthier. We all know stuff that is going to basically make us healthy. We all know things that maybe we shouldn't be doing that we are doing. So just because you know that information doesn't actually give you the power, it just gives you the ability to make a decision, make a choice, so you can choose how to have a healthier future. So I love this quote by Dean Ornish, basically. Your body has a remarkable capacity, basically, to begin healing itself if you give it the chance to do so. So you're really tonight, what I want to help you guys understand is you are in control of your own destiny, where you want to be, what you want your life to be like as you age, as you get older, or maybe as you get to where your parents are at. So, we talked about, I know you guys all came here tonight because we wanted to talk about the chemistry of life, but really we're going to talk about so much more than that. So really, what do iPhones and the Samsung Galaxy, or I guess that's, what is that one? I don't know, one of the Samsung phones, basically. What do they have anything to do with chiropractic? So, and the thing is how many of you had, maybe a piece of technology? Maybe you have one. There's a good chance that almost everyone in these rooms has one of these pieces of technology in some way, shape, or form. Or at least your life has at least been impacted by it. So, and the thing is okay, so you've had this piece of technology for maybe a year, maybe you've had it for 2 years. How often is that you learn a new feature on it? Like maybe something is how to keep your calendar, how to keep your contacts. Every little step of that, basically, that really enhanced your life. And that's really what this is about, is because I want you to understand how to get the most out of your chiropractic care. Because the thing is realistically, the vast majority might be only using it to maybe 10, 15, at the most 20%. How can you get the most out of that care, and how to really increase human performance and basically human function and stuff like that. So, basically, we've talked about the chemistry of life. Why did I call this class that? Is because every aspect of your biology, every aspect of your life is controlled by chemistry. So for your heart to beat, I love this picture because it's okay, I don't think I can get any more emotions in there than this one picture. So it's, every single one of those emotions is controlled by a different chemical process. Think about your heart to beat. What has to actually happen in order for your heart to beat at the right rhythm? For the right rhythm for you, for where your body's at. A certain amount of chemicals need to be released here. A certain amount of chemicals need to be released there. Think about your kidneys. Think about your liver. How it's every single one of those processes is controlled by chemicals. And basically, in order to basically, change your body chemistry, when you change your body chemistry, you're going to change your performance. And the reason to help you guys understand this a little bit more is, there's not a single person in this room who basically, if their heart is beating at 72 beats a minute and they need to run and catch a bus, there's not an athlete in the entire world who could catch that bus if their chemistry didn't change first and their heart rate didn't increase. So that's where we're talking about how much human performance is basically affected by body chemistry. Not only that, but think about how, athletes, why are there banned substances in the Olympics? Why are there banned substances in the NCAA and in professional sports? And those are chemicals. And why? Because they change some aspect of how your body functions. The thing is, a lot of them have a lot of negative effects down the road, which is a lot of times why they ban them, is because with steroids and stuff like that, it significantly increases your risk of cancer, increases other injuries and stuff like that. Just basically they consider an unfair advantage to those people that were using it. I mean, just think of whether you agree or not with the whole Lance Armstrong thing. I mean, what he did. It's like everyone kind of is aware of that. And what was he doing? You see, he was enhancing his body's chemistry. There's a doctor I know down in he's in Texas basically, and what they'll do is basically Olympic sprinters, they'll go to him because they know every single time that he sees them, they run their best time ever. So Tyson Gay, the guy who beat Usain Bolt, basically, if you remember, basically the world record holder, Tyson Gay, what he did is he went and saw this doctor, and what did he do? He did an estrogen detox on Tyson. It's like, why would you do an estrogen detox on a man, who's an Olympic sprinter, basically? And what it came down to is when estrogen starts to elevate, it starts to decrease your testosterone and human growth hormone. So by basically cutting out the estrogen out of the system and detoxing that, it was able to allow his body naturally, he quadrupled his testosterone level just by getting rid of the estrogen out of it. So there's a lot of things within our body that are just controlled, by chemistry. And here's actually before I look at this girl here. I mean, think of all the things, you see that, and instantly sneezing, allergies, stuff like that. Histamine, all that stuff is controlled by body chemistry. Here's a main one, women with their menstrual cycle. Look at all the different hormones that need to happen. Temperature spikes, as the uterine lining changes. All of those things are controlled by body chemistry. So it's there's a lot for it to coordinate. So I want you to think about this. We talked basically there's the heart, there's the liver, there's the lung. It's amazing to me that as we're born, basically we can have a sperm and an egg come together and actually create an entire human being. I mean, I think that's pretty amazing in that sense. I mean, I know there isn't in that sense, even with the best, biological, technical, whatever engineering they can do now, they still can't create something from nothing, basically, in that sense. So you're still relying on those. So, when you think about that, what I want you to start to understand is, what's the first organ? What do people think the first organ that forms is? The heart. Any other guesses? The brain. Spinal cord. So you got, of course, it's a chiropractic office. We talk about the brain and spinal cord. So of course it's going to be the brain and spinal cord. But the thing is, what I want you to understand is really how does that body develop? So what happens is about 8 weeks, basically that primordial streak forms, and then which then ultimately becomes the brain and spinal cord. And off of those, then little filaments start to happen, and off the end of those filaments, that's where those organs grow. So literally your brain is primary, and all this stuff grows out of base of that spinal cord, so your body's able to coordinate, regulate, and that's how it's regulating that body chemistry, is your nervous system is really in control of all that. And it's something pretty amazing to realize, how much, going back to this slide here, how many different, this is, realistically, if you think about this, this is just 4 chemicals right here. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of different chemicals in our body at any given time. Actually, there's probably more than 1,000. There's well over 1,000 just because there's, at least 250 that shouldn't be there, just from all the toxicity within our environment and stuff like that. So, think of all the different processes that has to go on, that your brain has to control in order to allow that to happen. You think about, going back to how those organs, they grew out of base of that. It's, you think about that, it's kind of silly to think it's like, okay, if you wanted an apple tree, you wouldn't go buy a whole bunch of apples, throw them up into the air, try to quick plant a tree and have them hopefully land in the tree, and then there's your apple tree. It's like, no, those apples grow out of that tree, and there's a reason for that, is because there's a dominance, there's a certain order that needs to happen in order for things to be healthy and functioning well. So we talked about basically, all these organs, they all do some different aspect of, basically body chemistry. They all do some different aspect of human performance, human function. And think about this. So the spinal cord, it's so important that it's actually entirely surrounded by bone. I think most of you guys probably know that, but as it's surrounded by bone, what do you think would happen? What happens if you get a slight misalignment in one of those bones? Bulging disc, okay, you hear that. So, people, think pain. Pain is always the first thing that people realize, and that's really one of the main points that I want to get across today, is if you're using chiropractic for pain, that's where you're probably only really getting maybe 5% of its benefits. Because if you think about every single one of those nerves goes to an organ. Every single one of those nerves goes to a different body part. Now, if if that vertebrae gets out of alignment and puts pressure on the nerve, or it creates some sort of adverse mechanical cord tension, which is a tension on the spinal cord itself. Now, say the nerve that's running to the liver is decreased at 10%. What's going to happen to that liver in through there, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road? Do you think it's going to be functioning as well as it should be? And it's like you start to see, disease processes start to set up. And that's what they looked at. It's like, okay, Henry Windsor, he was a medical, basically pathologist. What he did was he took a look at, he's like, okay, why are chiropractors getting all these, good results? Like, how is this possible with them just adjusting the spine? So he started basically taking a look at autopsies. What he found was nearly 100% correlation with basically, like, not only a major deviation of the spine, but a smaller deviation of the spine, that there was organ dysfunction at the end of that. And these are people who, basically, died of old age, not necessarily of a traumatic injury or something like that, but those were the cadavers that he was looking at, and almost 100% of the time, there was correlation. Now, the greater the curvature, the greater the disease of the organ is what he also found too. So that's why basically spinal alignment is so important. It's like, you think about back and you think about this, but really what it comes down to is human performance and function. Where if your body's in alignment, it's going to function well, and your body's going to do well, and it's going to give you the best chance to function at 100%. So you can be your best human athlete. You can be your best performer in that sense. So here's another one, Abraham Taubman, another MD in through there. What he did is he took a look at newborns and stillbirths. 80% of the time, newborns, what he found is that they had a subluxation of C1, which is the top bone of the neck. And those were just newborns. He also took a look at SIDS, and it was 95% of the time he found a subluxation right in that top bone of the neck. 95% of the time when those babies were born, stillborn. So there was a massive subluxation on that upper neck, which was affecting the breathing rate, which was affecting basically how their body was functioning. And it was so great that their body couldn't overcome that, which is why, unfortunately, they didn't make it through that whole birth process. Here's another for Masha and Dasha. Who here has been to my class recently and heard about Masha and Dasha? Nobody here has ever heard of Masha and Dasha? Okay, well, you're in for a good surprise then. So I wasn't sure, because I've been talking about this in my NSA class recently. So Masha and Dasha, they're Siamese twins, and you can maybe kind of tell in the picture in through there. So they were born in Russia. Of course, it's Russians, the USSR in that sense. So what did they do at that time? They told their parents that your babies died in childbirth. And what did they do? They took the babies and then started doing research on them. Why did they want to take a look at those babies? So when you take a look at them, so what they did is they had obviously kind of two separate upper halves. They shared a pelvis, and they shared two legs. One had control of the right leg, one had control of the left leg. It took them, I think, almost 10 years to learn how to coordinate themselves to be able to walk, basically. Now, what made them unique is they had two separate nervous systems. They had two separate spinal cords and two separate brains. And so what happened then is when they were kind of, I think it was like 8 or 9, one of them got measles and one of them didn't. So how is that possible if the measles virus is running through both of their bodies at the same time, because they're sharing blood, they're sharing body chemistry, they're sharing all of that, but why is one expressing the disease and why is one not? Because the nervous system is what coordinates that. They showed, there's recent studies too where they took a look at where they're injecting different toxins into the system where they know it causes inflammation. I think his name is Speransky, I can't remember his first name, but he did a study. What he did was, sorry to be graphic, but he literally severed all of basically the vascularity in through the ear and then injected that substance into the ear, which then created a massive influence to the rest of the system. So there's no way for that chemical to really get transferred through the blood. So it's the nervous system that actually kicked in that whole inflammatory process. And there's another one too where they took a look at, it was interleukin 1, which actually can spike a fever. And what they did is when they cut the vagus nerve, the body no longer spiked that fever. So the nervous system is in direct control of how your body functions to the immune, how your body coordinates everything. So it really shows us, the importance of having a healthy nervous system, having your body function at 100%, because so much, different body chemistry is controlled by that. So who here has ever even heard of this word? I'd be surprised if anyone has, but who here has ever heard of this word? Well, Casey probably has, because I probably talked about it. It's the benefit of being an employee of Biometrics. You get to know a lot of other things behind the scenes that we talk about and how things relate. So what is salutogenesis? Salutogenesis is a term coined by Aaron Antonovsky, a professor of medical sociology. The term describes an approach to focusing on factors that support human health and well-being rather than focusing on the cause of disease. So here's the origin, because he pretty much created this word, salus, which equals health, and genesis, which is origin. Does anyone know what the counterpart to that word is?
Yeah.
Pathology, pathogenesis, basically. So pathology, more or less, which is patho, which is disease, and ology, which is basically the study of, so the study of disease. Now, if you study really diseases, does that really tell you anything about what creates health? No. So that's really the dichotomy into here, which I want you to understand is, just because you understand everything about this disease process, you really know nothing about actually health. They're two separate and distinct things. So, with that, let's kind of go into where's the kind of the medical viewpoint maybe of where disease is. So Watson and Crick, I'm sure probably, if anyone had biology anytime, I guess not this century since we're in the 21st century, but Watson and Crick have been around quite a long time. So independent of necessarily maybe when you had biology or if you had biology, but has everyone here pretty much, who here doesn't know who Watson and Crick are? Okay, so maybe I made maybe too big of a large assumption then. So Watson and Crick are the people who basically figured out the double helix. They're the ones who figured out kind of how the DNA comes together and it works. Since we figured out DNA, we said, aha, we have it figured out. This is how life functions. This is how it works. This is what our genes are. This is what's going to determine what our future is. But unfortunately, quite a few years down the road, we found out after we started researching this, because we figured, okay, well, if we have these genes, this is deterministic. If we have this, we're going to have this trait. We're going to have this problem. Maybe we're going to have breast cancer. Maybe we're going to have prostate cancer. Maybe we're going to have this other disease. And what they found out was that's, unfortunately, really not the case, which is, the new study of epigenetics. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, maybe a lot about kind of Bruce Lipton's work and kind of what he's really helped us understand greater is because, really if you come in with the assumption that genes are deterministic, how well are we going to take care of ourselves if we think that we have no influence over that? No. How easy is it for us to say, though, I have this disease, this is my scapegoat, because it's like they're so commonly, it's like for years, there's definitely a trend changing now, which I'm kind of excited about because people are realizing they have the ability to take care of themselves and modify stuff. But really, it's like you have to realize that we are in control of this process. Just because you have that gene no longer means that it gets expressed. So I'm going to kind of run through that. Basically, we're taught that we're victims of our genes. What he really figured out is when he took a look at it. So the genes, basically, okay, we have this many genes. These genes code for these proteins. They assumed, okay, we need probably about 120,000 genes in order to make them out of proteins and stuff like that. So then comes along the Human Genome Project where we're mapping all the genes, mapping out the infrastructure of the DNA, and what did they find out? Oh, we only have 35,000. So there's a vast gap between what we need to be at in order for what we know is order for the body to function and what we actually have. So there's a whole other way that basically the genes work that we weren't taught basically in school. Genes aren't basically deterministic. So, what were we really taught in school? So here's, once again, there's the cell for any of those, maybe it's been quite a few years since biology. So hopefully I won't bore you guys too much with some of the underlying biology and through there. But what we learned, at least what I learned anyways, is, the nucleus of the cell, just similar to the body, that's the brain. That controls all the functions and through every aspect of how the body works, or how the cell works. Now the problem with that is if you take out the brain of anything living, what happens to it? It dies. What happens when you take the nucleus out of a cell? You guys probably don't know this. It survives. It lives. It still functions. But guess what it can't do? It can't replicate. So it can't replicate, and it can't also produce obviously any of maybe the proteins and stuff like that we need as far as that. So the cell just doesn't die. So really, what does that tell us then? Is that the nucleus is more the gonad, not the brain. And there's much more than that. So basically, take a look at this. Basically, nucleus isn't the brain. So I'm going to try to go through this information quick so you can understand kind of the bigger picture, because I want to take a look at basically start you guys to understand a little bit more basically how the proteins work. So the simple answer is proteins are basically, it's a link of amino acids in a certain chain. There's about 20 amino acids that we have within our body, and the different combination is what creates the proteins. So think about the amino acids. It's like the alphabet. Every word that we see is different, and how do we? So like say like race car, for instance, or say like the word mom or dad or husband. Like every single one of these words has its own unique way that it's spelled. Same thing with these proteins. Each one of these proteins has its very unique signature as far as how is it spelled. Now the spelling of that, this protein structure, depending on how it basically is, it's going to twist and fold onto itself. And what you have is basically like what ultimately determines the shape is when you take a look up through here. Do most people understand magnets? If you take a positive and positive together, what happens? They repel. Negative, negative, they repel. You positive and negative, they come together. So basically, proteins are exactly the same way. You have a positive side, you have a negative side. Maybe you have two positive sides or two negative sides. Depending on where those charges are at, changes the shape and structure of that protein. And then what happens is basically a signal molecule comes in, it changes basically the charge on that side, which then changes the shape of the protein. So when you change the shape of the protein, basically that's ultimately going to alter behavior of that cell. People following me so far? Okay. So really what happens is there's a signal that comes in from the environment. It comes down, it hits the cell membrane, secondary signal comes in, changes basically that protein in through there, which then basically changes its function. So really, the environment is what's controlling that protein structure and the behavior in through there. So environmental signal affects the cell membrane, kind of jump through that. So really what does it come down to? Perception, which is awareness of the environment, is what's controlling the behavior of the cell. This is why the cell doesn't die when you actually take the nucleus out, but that's why it continues to live. It just can't replicate. It can't. It's also its longevity is going to decrease because it's not going to be able to replace the parts that it needs because the thing that you have, the map you have to basically code for that is gone. But ultimately it's really modifying behavior of the cell. So conclusion one, from Bruce Lipton basically, perception controls behavior, which is perception of the environment. So once again, basically, genes are not in control of your biology. The simple way to understand it is if we were born with a cancer gene, and genes were deterministic, if that gene caused cancer, you would be born with that cancer. It wouldn't be happening 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road because that gene would have to be expressed when you were born if genes were deterministic in that way. So that's not to say that, okay, hey, I have a pretty significant ability to kind of modify stuff, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So what's the next thing? So basically, perception controls genes. So not only does the perception of the environment control behavior, which is behavior of the proteins, behavior of the cells, it also controls genetic expression as well too. So we have basically those two things. So I want you to think about this a little bit more. So really, when it comes down to a cellular level, a cell cannot be in growth and defense at the same time. If you throw if you get a petri dish and you throw some sort of negative stimulant in there, the cell's going to move away. If you throw something positive in there, the cell's going to move towards it. So really, the cell can't be in growth and defense at the same time. So if you start taking a look at this from a system perspective, if a cell can't be in growth and defense at the same time, how can a human being, think about that. So cells make up organs. Is that organ being growth or defense at that stage? Is that, and if that organism's growth or defense, what is that basically, the individual, what's that body going to be doing? That's going to be in growth or defense. So that one thing has the ability to really affect globally really what's happening. So, just to really show this once again in the sense of basically, your nervous system interprets the environment. So here's, environment. So these are basically two different 3-year-old children. One's on the left, one's on basically kind of extreme neglect. So you can see literally the brain size is different. Look at the difference in the hemispheres into here. And here there's a lot of basically neuroplasticity happening, a lot of new connections happening. Here the body's already trying to write its programs to learn how to survive in this world. There's a lot of learning that gets shut off when that happens, and not only that, but they know growth is stunted into there. So, in that sense, we know then basically, that environment is how that is affecting gene expression. So they showed once again, relative to this study too, where orphans, they took a look at basically Eastern European, orphanages into there, and what they found out was, they looked at, just horrible environment that these kids were in. Not only that, but lack of touch, lack of social communication, horrible nutrition. A good chunk of them, they were okay, they were turning autistic, they were turning all these different, negative things, and it was the environment that was ultimately regulating that genetic expression through there. So here's the final conclusion that you really want you guys to understand, because this is where your ability to control yourself has a huge factor, which is perception can rewrite genes. What they found out, so initially it's like, okay, genes, they thought genes were deterministic. What they found out now is that genes, you actually have basically genes that they're literally for genetic engineering. They're literally for you perceiving, what you're perceiving in the environment, what you're doing to your body is literally rewriting, it's not just rewriting the genetic code, it's rewriting the expression. Actually, I take that back. The genetic engineering ones, those are actually rewriting the code. There's a whole other aspect of epigenetics on top of that as well too. But basically, it's rewriting your body to give your body the best chance to adapt to what's going on. So what's happening is all the time your body is perceiving what's going on, and it's making changes relative to the environment that it's existing in. And realize environment goes well beyond just what you're kind of going through here. It's like the emotional state you're in, the stress state you're in, the food you're eating, what you're doing to your body physically. All of these things are what the body's perceiving as its environment. And you literally have genes that are actually taking a look at this and trying to change the codes to give you the best chance of survival. Not only that, but epigenetically then, what'll start to happen is there's different histone, there's different groups that get attached onto that DNA molecule which turn areas off, and it'll turn other areas on. So when you start to look at that, you're in control of your life, you're in control of your body. Genes are no longer deterministic, and it's really what you're doing to yourself that actually ultimately creates the outcome. So here's an example. So a mouse brain basically. So if you lived, they take a look at mice, if they throw them into a high stress environment basically where they're constantly fight or flight, their offspring come out basically like muscle bound, steroid bound, and their heads are literally just, their brains are shrunken. When they take them in the same mouse, or I should say different mouse, but same genetics in that sense, they take that mouse into a low stress environment, much more nurturing, those babies come out with large brains and small bodies. I have a great example of this. Just look at the National Football League. Where do the vast majority of those players come from? The inner city. And think about this. Their whole life they're trying to fight for survival. Their parents were fighting for survival. So what happens then is you come out with these monsters basically, who they're massive muscles, huge muscles, tall. They're very aggressive in that sense. Of course, it makes a great football player. But you start to think about that, and it's a very different environment of what that kid is. So not only so you get to see then how this genetic engineering, how your body, how the decisions you make, the environment you're living has a direct impact on kind of the future generations. They took a look at basically people who lived through the potato famine. I think it was like somewhere like Irish potato famine basically what they took a look at. And they found out the grandkids of the grandparents who went through that experience have a longer life expectancy by almost 7 years. So just that one episode there had a major impact, genetic, multiple generations wise of how that is. So maybe I was just trying to figure out a way to put a picture of our son there. So, because ultimately, what they're finding out now is the decisions that you make up until the point that basically, it's more so kind of because there's aspects of when the baby's in the womb too, but the decisions that you're making up until the point that the baby's born, and that goes not for just women, but it goes for men too. They know when like a woman's like cocaine, all those things, how that affects the baby. But what they also found out too is, say a man is a cocaine user, say he's a drug user, stuff like that. That has direct impact on the genetic expression. So it's like, just because all we are is a sperm donor doesn't mean that we're off the hook for the decisions that we make. We have to make the right decisions in order to be healthy, because that not only does that have a link onto our direct offspring, but I'll show you a slide in just a second how that goes a little bit further in through there. So literally the decisions that your parents made and your grandparents made, and I mean they've only so far tracked it back 2 generations, but I'm sure they could probably look and see further. But someone who, high fat diet, eating cheeseburgers, hamburgers, stuff like that, they're finding the grandkids high cholesterol, heart disease, cancer, all these other things, just decisions that the grandparents made and how that's influencing it. And so it's one of those things where you start to look at the health of our kids now, and it's just like, you think it's just like, okay, we're always looking at like what's causing this, and you don't realize like, okay, this problem's probably been going on for a long time. I mean, basically our bodies have been kind of engineering ourselves to try to respond to the environment we're in, and it's doing the best it can, but you're just not giving it the nutrients that it needs and the proper support that it needs. So really what it comes down to, so we talked about kind of perception of the environment. What controls the perception of the environment? It's the nervous system. The nervous system is really what's perceiving everything within the environment. So because you look around, you see things. What controls basically, the stress or the flight or fright response, the stress response in through there. Your body's constantly asking itself, am I safe? How can 2 people working in the same job next to each other, one is massively stressed out and one is doing fine? 2 very similar situations, but 2 are very different responses. So in that scenario, here's basically the fight or flight response. So so this is kind of what's going on in through here. This is kind of how it affects basically the system in through there. Is that fight or flight response is basically engaged, and that's changing then our perception, because if we're in this stress state, then we're constantly perceiving our environment as stressful. Think about someone who's a pessimist. Think about someone who's an optimist. If you're an optimist, you might go into a horrible situation, but try to find the benefit of it. But if you're a pessimist, everywhere you go, positive things might be happening, but it's just the world is gloom and doom. What impact is that having on your biology? We know it's affecting your genes and your genetic expression, because that's what they're finding out now, is you have to have a positive mental attitude. That's why having optimism, you live 7 years longer. It's because it has a positive influence on those genes. Because it's controlling what you're perceiving, what you're experiencing, and what's happening within the world. So, so basically, once again, beliefs control perception. If you rewrite your beliefs, you change your perception basically. If you change your perception, you basically change your genes and your behavior. So things like eating right, exercising, meditating, yoga, all those things that are creating positive things for your life, you're changing your genetic expression. So, we talked about, I'll jump into kind of, this is Dean Ornish's study. This is probably the one that I think shows it best of anything that I've ever seen when it comes to genetic expression, basically. He took a look at over 500 genes, basically, and these were the ones that they could identify. And what they did is they took men who had basically kind of prostate cancer, basically. And prostate cancer is one where they just kind of watch and wait, kind of see what happens. So it's like, okay, here's the perfect category. Someone has cancer. What can we do to modify the cancer? Because typically it doesn't respond super great to medical treatment. So what did they do? They had them basically start to eat right. They had them exercise every single day. They had them meditating or do yoga. They had them all start to modify all these health factors. And what did he find out is they were able to increase 48 transcripts, and basically, which were upregulated, and 453 were downregulated. So they turned off 453 cancer-producing genes and upregulated 48 basically cancer, shutting down type genes.
I don't understand that term, upregulated and downregulated.
So in the sense, so simply put, 48 genes were turned off, or 48 genes were turned on, 453 were turned off. So that's simply put. Basically, were they able to identify what the gene actually was? Every single case, it went into the positive direction, basically. So that which caused cancer was shut off. That which was, basically more health promoting or basically tumor suppressing in that sense, that's what got turned off. And that's just, that's changing lifestyle. That's someone who has cancer. That's someone who already has, worst case scenario basically into there. So think about it, it's like, do you want to wait till you have worst case scenario to do something about your life? Hopefully not. So I talked a little bit before about how I wanted to show you kind of how does life effect have effect on multiple generations. I mean, I think this picture shows it best. You get a mom smoking, first generation is affecting her obviously. Then you got the fetus, which is affecting basically the second generation, and then basically they're either the ovaries or testes, and whatever the offspring is, that's also being affected. So you have multiple generations. This is just direct. This is direct assault basically in through there relative to smoking. We look at smoking as bad, but it's like what about the health choices? What maybe eating potato chips. Maybe drinking soda. Maybe eating not exercising. Every single one of those factors is having an impact on how that body and that baby is going to be expressed, and that code is getting written into basically the next generation, even beyond that, through the gonads of that offspring that's in there. So you start to realize the decisions I make really have a much further reaching impact than you could ever think. So identical twins. So I talked a lot about kind of the genetic expression and stuff like that. So when they take a look at identical twins, genetically they stay pretty much identical their entire life. Now, because they're identical twins in through there. What happens though epigenetically? When they're first born, they're almost identical. When they actually, the further on they go on in life, they're almost completely different. And aside from the fact that maybe some twins are just like they stay connected their whole life, there's some weird situations just with how they get connected. They live together, eat the same foods, marry other twins, and so on. But when they actually take a look at twins and they start living apart, making their own decisions, epigenetically they're not recognizable when you start getting 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years out. And the reason is because what they've been doing to the life decisions they've been making have been changing their genetic expression. So if you can change your genetic expression, you're giving yourself a better chance. So that's why taking a look at those epigenetics in through there can be pretty significant. I mean, think about this. I mean, a lot of people you may or may not know, but it's common for identical twins, one to be taller, one to be shorter. We have, I'm trying to think, we have at least. I think we've had at least 4 sets of identical twins through our office kind of in the years, and it's like I can tell exactly which one they are. I had friends in high school who were identical twins. It's funny because the teachers would be like, which one is that? Because they like to switch out. Who would go to one class, especially test day, one would study for one test, and the other one would study for the other test. So they found ways to work the system. So we already talked about this. What really controls perception, which is the nervous system. I love this quote from Donnie because the tone, shape, tension of your spine, and spinal cord. Because the spinal cord is literally an extension of the brain into the body. We used to say in chiropractic school, the brainal cord. Because what they're finding out now is that the brain actually does processing. When you look at it from the functional MRI, which measures brain function, they're seeing that the spine is doing processing. It's changing information, it's reading, it's regulating signals. Not only that, what they also found too was that the dorsal horn of the spinal cord basically is where the majority of the limbic tissue in your entire body is actually located at. The limbic tissue is what perceives emotion. So literally the emotional state you're in changes based on the tone and tension of your spine, which is one of the reasons why when we're working on you on the table, it's easier for us to say, hey, wow, you kind of got angry today. How'd you know that? It's like, well, your body's telling me that. It's like you can feel that. They showed that you can actually feel more emotions in somebody's body, up to 8 compared to when you just look at a picture. When you just look at a picture, they were only ever able to, with kind of statistical significance, one emotion basically. So that's pretty amazing, where 8 is by touch, 1 is by looking at something like that. And think of how hands-off our society is now, and how disconnected basically we are. We don't touch each other, we don't hug each other. It's like fear of the germs, fear of this. It's not to say that that's unwarranted, but what sort of consequences that having? So we talked a lot about genes. So basically finishing this one, the spinal cord are in direct relation to the tone, shape, tension of your life. Because what the emotions you're experiencing changes the shape of the state of the spinal cord that's in, which changes your experience and you're having, which then changes which information is being perceived by the external world. I like to use this as an example. Think about a time where you were happy and you stubbed your toe. It might not hurt quite as bad. Think about a time where maybe you were a little pissed off and you stubbed your toe. You probably had a few more choice words come out of your mouth. Your body was already in that angry state. It was already in that agitated state. So what's happening is so much more information that went up to the brain. You didn't have this down-regulating effect of when the system is in a positive state. So that's why emotional states play such a factor into our everyday life, why optimism, pessimism, all those things play such a factor into that. So we talked about DNA. So okay, we obviously having the nervous system play an effect like that. So they took a look at serum thiol levels within network spinal analysis. Actually, what they first did, the first study was they took a look at cancer patients, and they looked at serum thiol levels in the general population, basically. And then they found out, okay, well, they've kind of basically made the baseline of cancer patients as 0, because serum thiol is basically a measurement of DNA repair. And then what they did was they took a look at general population, and it was basically 200, which was kind of double that of basically the cancer patients. So the chiropractors looked at that and they're like, well, heck, let's see where the chiropractic population is because we keep talking about health, we keep talking about the nervous system, we keep talking about this salutogenesis in this aspect. And what they found out was that NSA was 400, which was double that of the general population, 4 times that of the cancer patients. And that's serum thiol, that's DNA repair. So you're giving your best chance to have the best, healthiest existence by getting that chiropractic care, getting adjusted, taking care of your body, creating better things. Because think about this, if your nervous system is functioning better, you're going to perceive the world around you differently. You're going to perceive the positive things that are actually starting to happen for you. Not only that, but then you're going to be able to make better decisions. And that's really what we showed. I'm going to jump through a couple slides here to this one. And that's what we showed with research basically. Took a look at it. These are the 5 main categories. Every single one of these has at least 10 subcategories basically. And when they took a look at the research basically, so network basically improved overall quality of life, improved physical state, improved life enjoyment, improved mental emotional state, and improved response to stress. 96% of the people, and this was a study of 2,818 people, 96% of those people had improvements in every single one of those categories. So what impact is that going to have on your life? Improving the level of function of your nervous system, improving your body chemistry so your body can function at 100%, so your performance can do that. So really, what I want you guys to gain from tonight, there's one simple thing. So it's like, okay, if you're utilizing basic chiropractic from the standpoint of neck pain, back pain, and you realize it's like you're missing the boat basically, because it really comes down to human performance and human function. How is your body able to perceive its environment around it? Because that's where you're going to be able to make better decisions. So here's what I want you to realize. So here's what I call basically a cycle of dis-ease and through here. So it's the letter N, and just because I kind of stole this from Reggie Gold, which he's a chiropractor who definitely, he was, I would say, one of the forefathers relative to helping some the general population understanding really what chiropractic is about. Because if you take a look at this, human performance, this is really what chiropractic is about, is all of that. So what happens is this human performance is controlled by body chemistry. Body chemistry is controlled by the organs and glands, which is controlled by the nervous system, and then you get back into that whole perception of DNA and stuff like that. So once again, that nervous system is controlling that DNA and on all those aspects of how your body is playing itself out, how your offspring, how your kids, how your grandkids, how every single one of those factors happen. Next, then you have the vertebrae, which protects that, but then the downside is when you have this subluxation that happens, which is that misalignment. So it's putting that cord pressure on. It's putting that pressure directly on the nerve. And it might not necessarily be just direct pressure, it might be stretching that nerve. That's why when you looked at that, Henry Windsor, when he took a look at that, that's why that twisting pattern was so detrimental, is because they found out stretching nerve is more detrimental to it than actually compressing it. With the weight of a dime, actually decreases nerve function by up to 40%. So actually, I think it's like 60%. And that study was actually done in the University of Colorado Boulder. So that was pretty groundbreaking, because it's like, okay, that small amount of pressure, the weight of a dime, has that much massive impact on nerve function. That's pretty important. So you think about, okay, this bone is just subtly out of alignment, or maybe there's some torquing or pulling on it. What is the quality of your life like? What is the quality of the organ like? So in steps of subluxation, which basically creates that misalignment, which creates this nerve compression, which then decreases the perception from the environment. So if you're not perceiving the environment properly, then you're going to have modified gene expression, which then decreases gland function, which then changes the chemistry, which then lowers your human performance. And this is what's so significant about chiropractic, because when you deliver that adjustment, you deliver that basically that inputting that force into the system, what does it do is it realigns basically the bone. And then when that bone realigns, basically you take that pressure off the nervous system, allows the body to perceive what's going on. Not only from an internal state, from an external state. That nervous system is balancing everything out from the inside. So if you're able to say, okay, well, the kidney needs this support because the liver is doing this, because the stomach's doing this, because the heart's beating this hard and the lungs need this much oxygen, that's what's controlling everything internally. So then you start to free up so your body can have proper expression, which then improves gland function, which then obviously restores body chemistry so you can regain performance. So it's really, I don't want to say simple, because it's complex. Every single one of those processes are complex, but if you look at it as a whole, that's really how simple it is. It's just taking an understanding of this is how the body functions. This is where the chemical processes are controlled by the nervous system. So, I talked about, everyone basically, when they took a look at chiropractic, everyone, they already know, neck pain, back pain, sciatica. This is kind of when you get these things, this is what people, everyone knows that chiropractic helps with this. So basically, after kind of what you've learned tonight, what can chiropractic help with? Everything. And that's because the nervous system controls everything. I love when people come in and they're like, well, I have this heart problem. Give me this adjustment for this heart problem. It's like, well, the body doesn't work like that. What we're going to do is we're going to free up the nervous system and allow your body to function at 100%. But we don't know if the heart is off because maybe the kidneys aren't functioning right, which is maybe decreasing the amount of water that your body needs, so your blood is too thick. All of these things that can go on. So it's like if I'm just pounding away on the nerve that goes to the heart, well, that's not really where the problem is. That's why we need to assess. That's why we take a look at the full spine. Every aspect of our assessment, we're taking a look at the full system, because everything is interconnected. That's why we take full spine x-rays. That's why when we do the scans, it's from head down to basically the sacrum. The same thing with the thermal patterns into there. Posture kicks, every single one of those things, we're looking at it as a systemic thing, so we can say, hey, where is someone's problem at? But what is this ultimately affecting into there? So, basically everything here. Here's the main things that I would love for people just to realize. If you just got anything from tonight, what I wish everyone knew about chiropractic is it helps the immune system, it helps decrease stress, it helps basically balance your body chemistry, which then improves your quality of life. Not only that, but it changes your DNA expression because you're able to better perceive the environment. You're better able to make better decisions. Your body's making unconscious decisions 24/7 about what's happening. Wouldn't you want to give it the best chance possible? So, we talked about this once again. Knowledge is potential power. You are not a victim of your genes. You have the ability to change your life. You have the ability to, if you have the worst, cancer genes, you have the ability to, shut those off. You have the ability to upregulate things that create health. So what I want you guys to think about here is, where do you want to be, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from the road? A lot of people don't ever think about that. It's kind of hard to say, what's your 5-year plan, because I think some people get, irritated by that question. But, realistically, people age 65 now aren't as healthy as their parents were at the same age. How did we get to that state? Well, it's basically through the decisions that we've made and decisions that they've made too. But what do you want your future to be like? Do you want to have, do you want to go through the same processes that they did? Do you want to, maybe they had heart disease, maybe they had cancer. I mean, a lot of people, you either have someone or you know someone where you took care of your parent, or parents, or maybe your friend or someone like that later on in life. And I can't tell you the number of people who come in here and they say, I don't want my life to be like that when I get to that age. I don't want to be that big of a burden on my family. So because of that, that's what's driving them to make better decisions, because right now we know if everyone just goes down the same path as what kind of the research is showing, we're going to be a much sicker culture, and we're going to need a lot more support. And not only that, but the kids are sicker now too, and they're the ones who are taking care of us. So you have a sick culture basically that needs to start to change and realize we have power over our own future. We have the ability to control stuff and create changes. So who's ultimately responsible for your health?
You are.
You are. I love this one. Can be more direct and through here. And here's another one too. I borrowed this slide from my wife when she spoke at the chiropractic conference recently. So, what you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. Ralph Waldo Emerson. And how does this relate? Because we run wellness scores on people. We take a look at their biology. We take a look at their biometrics. What is their body looking like? And if those metrics look bad, I don't care what you're telling me. I know it's not working for a year. So what you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear the words that are coming out of your mouth. I know you need to make a change. If you're telling me like, oh, I eat healthy, 90% of the population thinks they eat healthy. But the sad thing is only 10% of the people actually are eating healthy. The vast majority of people can't even remember the last time they had a salad. To me, that's disturbing. Good job. But it's one of those things. It's like, what are you putting in your mouth? What's the food that you're feeding yourself? Because that's the energy. That's what your body's replicating its cells off of. I mean, do you want your your eye cells, your liver? Do you want it to be making it out of McDonald's hamburgers? They're pink slime that supposedly doesn't exist anymore, but ends up in there anyways. I mean, what do you want your body making itself of? Or you want it making itself out of the best organic, naturally grown stuff, non-pesticide laced foods, so you can have the best chance, so your kids can have the best chance. So, with that, basically, I want you guys, we have a lot of stuff coming up in the near future. We have Community Appreciation Month, so thanks to Jennifer, I actually have a list of everything because I couldn't keep track of everything in my head. So, September 28th to October 10th, basically a community appreciation weeks in that sense. So if there's anyone that who wants to learn more about how their body functions, how it's regulating itself, it's basically one of our best offers through the entire year, where it is $29 to get a full wellness score. So talk about looking at biometrics. This is going to tell you where you're at. And if you want to take a deeper look under the hood, we have the ability to do some blood work, so we can take a look at homocysteine, C-reactive protein, which are inflammatory markers. We take a look at cholesterol, HDL, LDL, all those factors too, to really say, hey, how well are you actually doing? I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and that's for $140. You can actually get all that tested done. That's basically just that's actually less than cost for what it is for us. It's just really our gift back to the community, say, hey, this is what's going on. Do you need to make some sort of rapid change in your life to have a better outcome? Thursday, October 8th, we have our 8 Weeks to Wellness celebration. So we've been doing this for a year and a half now, the whole 8 Weeks to Wellness system. And for anyone who wants to learn more about that, someone who just wants to come and meet some people, their experiences, anyone who's been through the 8 Weeks to Wellness program, we highly encourage you guys to come. Learn more about it, learn how you can take care of yourself, learn what you can do to basically change your biology so you can have a better expression. And I can't tell you the amount of changes that we've seen in people. We had one girl, I think she dropped her triglycerides from in the mid-300s down to the low 100s. I mean, she had over a 250-point change just in triglycerides. That's an 8-week time frame. That's just that's blood work, and we'll see hemoglobin A1C. I mean, we'll see that drop too, which that's supposedly a 90-day marker. Well, how is that dropping if that's a 90-day marker, but it's improving? So it's like the body's able to change that cell. Every single one of those things changes your genetic expression. It changes your gene regulation. that's why we really ultimately decided to do this, to really invest so much time and energy. I mean, heck, we built out a fitness center so we can help better support people in that process. Because it's like, I got sick of hearing excuses basically, like, I can't do this or I can't do that. And it's like, I can't do this. We used to do the Ultimate Health Style Challenges, and people would come in and be like, all excited, like, oh, I love the class, what'd you guys do? And they'd be like, oh, I drink more water, and you're like, oh, like, there's so much more to health than drinking water. You gotta take action, and it's like, we need to create a step of accountability for people. So, Thursday, October 8th, 6:30 p.m., come to that dinner, learn more, meet people who've gone through the process, their experience as well too. Right now, on October 21st, we have basically the Boosting Your Immune System class. So with all the crap coming up for, between Thanksgiving, Halloween, Christmas, all the bad decisions we make, all the sickness that goes on, it's like, it's no wonder, like, what do? We have all these holidays back to back where we load up on sugar, load up on crap, load up on fats, and all these bad things. And it's no wonder January everyone's sick for the entire month. So what can you do to have a better outcome in January so you're not starting the year off where all you're trying to do is recover from the last 2 months for that entire year? So that class is really important. Now here's another exciting one that for the women in here, sorry guys, but the women in here, we have a women's morning out. That is November 21st. So I'm just going to read it. So we're inviting women in our community to come out for a basically full morning of wellness, including massage, meditation, SRI, fitness training, and more. So keep a lookout for the social media websites. That's one of the huge ways to kind of keep track of us. We do a lot on social media. We have YouTubes. I'm going to stick this video. So if anyone wants to watch it again, basically, you can go online and watch it. I can't promise I'm going to get it on tonight because realistically, probably not. But keep an eye on that one because we'll try to get that one up and posted. We have a lot of
the PowerPoint.
not the PowerPoint, this actual video. So like because we're recording it right now, so we'll have all that. If there's something you have a question on, you can talk to me. So we have Facebook, Twitter. I mean, we have Google Plus. I mean, we have multiple avenues for you guys to keep in touch with us. So you can learn more about what's coming up, make better decisions for yourself, to really empower yourself. How can I make better decisions for myself so I can have the most successful existence? That's really what our goal is here within the office. So other thing too is for any guests here tonight, what I want to actually do is I'm going to offer you the opportunity to have your spine check complimentary. So you don't have to wait till CAM week. You don't have to wait your weeks in through there. It's actually, the offer I'm giving tonight is actually better than what we were going to do for CAM, because CAM is going to cost you money. Tonight it doesn't cost you anything. But I will say this, you do have to take advantage of it tonight. That's the one stipulation, because we like to reward people who take advantage and motivation. I don't like to reward procrastination, because there's no procrastination doesn't create change. So for anyone there, I definitely wanted to offer that as well too. So that gets scheduled, gets done, which is 8 weeks tomorrow. Let's give us 8 weeks and we'll give you the rest of your life. So before I close, so this is what I've learned. This is what I learned from one of my other, the doctor actually down in Houston, where he helped Tyson Gay beat Usain Bolt. Is so I want to help you guys commit to memory, because if we're able to say, hey, what I want to do before we break is, what are 10 things we learned tonight? So we're going to run through that quickly, and then you guys can be on your way.
Perception can rewrite.
Yes, so there's one.
And you can change your codes for your best chance at survival.
We got 2. What are some other things people learn?
Chiropractic adjustments help your immune system.
There's 3.
Well, 8 weeks to wellness, what made a big change for my husband and I.
Yep. So we'll count that as 4. So what are some other things people learn? That way I know that my whole talking up here and rambling wasn't for a
The
waste.
nervous system controls.
Nervous system controls everything.
Genes are not deterministic.
Exactly. I love that. Thank you. Next. So is that 6 or is that 7?
You're in control.
You're in control. We'll count that as 7. Julie?
And your environment modifies cell behavior.
Yes.
Perception.
Yes. 8.
What did she say?
So your cells, your cell perception modifies basically DNA and also protein expression.
Life decisions change genetic expression.
Yeah, so 9. So one more.
Your beliefs shape your biology.
Awesome. Thank you.
What'd you say?
Your beliefs change your biology. Because your beliefs about what goes on shape. The beliefs shape your biology. Because what your beliefs are changes how you're perceiving the world. That has direct influence on how your biology functions and relates. So,
And it's interrelated with how your spine is functioning.
absolutely.
So your spine function actually contributes to your beliefs, sort of, they're
Yes.
interconnected.
And so that's what we talk about in basically our phases, stages, and levels in biofields classes. How basically, you know, the state, the shape of the tone and tension of your spine and nervous system, how that relates to your life and what's going on. So, good job. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Who was the author in that book?
Bruce Lipton. Of the Biology of Belief book is Bruce Lipton.
Biology what?
Biology of Belief.
Is this 8 weeks wellness, your own program, or is this something they?
This is actually more of a national program here. We're one of many offices that are doing that. I don't know what the number's up to. Last year was 70 plus offices in the U.S. There's 2 down by Castle Rock that are doing it. I think there might be one in Denver now. But it's one of those where Dane Donahue's basically, he's the founder of the program itself. Him and his twin sister Denise Tronsky, what they did is, you know, they had basically similar experiences we did. They had just been in practice longer, where, you know, they're adjusting their patients. You know, they knew they were making changes in people's lives, but they weren't making the changes they wanted to see in people's lives. And that's why they started to add in basically these other health factors and to create a program that really allows someone to say, hey, you know, what direction do you need to go to create health, and teaching someone how to be healthy, create some accountability for that, so that in 8 weeks you can change basically behavior. You can change bad habits in 8 weeks. They say I think it's like 21 days to change, you know, a habit into there. Well, this is 8 weeks. So if you want to change a habit, 8 weeks is we're going to get that to shift. So that's not to say though you can't still make bad choices, because you still are. You're once again you're in control of your future. So, but yes. Well, thank you guys for coming tonight. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you stimulated something. If anything, if all you learned, then we created some neuroplasticity and new neural connections for you guys.